Can Democrats win the Senate in the 2026 midterm elections? That's the question that we're going to answer in today's video. As of May of 2026, this is when I'm filming this video, this is what the current map will look like for the United States Senate coming to the November elections. And as you can tell, I already have a lot of states marked, and for that reason I wanted to kind of explain, because in the last video I went ahead and marked everything on screen for you guys, and we kind of talked about specific races that way. But in today's video specifically, I think it's going to be more important to go ahead and mark some of these states like Florida or Oklahoma that we know are going to go to Republicans by etc. margin. So for Florida, for example, anywhere from 5 to 15 percentage points. Oklahoma certainly will be won by over 15%. And that's kind of my margin here. You know, you have, of course, safe Republican, which is anywhere above 15%, likely Republican, anywhere from 5 to 15%, lean Republican, 1 to 5%, and tilt Republican, anywhere below a percentage point in favor of Republicans versus Democrats. Same thing for the Democratic side as well. So with that said, let's go ahead and jump into today's video and talk about specific Senate races and how we think this is going to shape out. I want to start by taking a look at VoteHub that has the margins and likelihood of each candidate winning in specific states. And we're going to talk a little bit more about what this means and my predictions for these states as well. So I want to start by talking about Maine. The Maine Senate race is going to be certainly really interesting. As you know, we've talked about this race on my channel multiple times before. But currently, VoteHub has Graham Plattner winning by about 4 percentage points in the Senate race between Susan Collins. Of course, in 2020, when Susan Collins ran, she outperformed polls by a lot. But because polling is predicting that she will win by such a large margin, of course, we haven't really seen many polls out. Actually, I don't think we've seen any since Janet Mills dropped out of this race. But every poll that we've talked about on this channel has been Plattner being able to outperform Mills anyway. So with that said, we're going to go ahead and give Maine to the Democrats, but we're going to do it not by a likely margin, which would be anywhere from 5 to 15%, but lean Democrats. So anywhere from 1 to 5%, I think is a safe call to say that Maine will go to the Democratic Party by that kind of margin. Of course, certainly could be wrong. There's a lot of factors to point towards the fact that that Susan Collins could win this race, and I'm subject to that if that happens. But as of May, when I'm filming this video, it seems at least apparent that Susan Collins will end up losing this race. With that said, let's move on over to Michigan, another state that we've recently talked about on this channel. And this one is quite interesting. I think Mike Rogers actually seems to have a lot more of a shot, especially against Elsaid, than people have originally thought. As we talked about in my last video, I believe, Haley Stevens and Mallory McMorrow, they both are candidates who seem to be better candidates to run against Mike Rogers. But polling, at least at this point, says that Mike Rogers has a decent shot at winning this race. I think there is new polling out as of today, the day that I'm filming this, but I'm not 100% sure. I haven't seen that polling. I heard it. So, but I'm not seeing it on screen, so it must not be any new polling out for that. And then if we go to VoteHub, another state that has Democrats winning by about 4.6%. So with that said, I also agree. I still believe that there's a high likelihood that, that Mike Rogers does not win this race. I think that this polling is certainly interesting, but I still believe, Haley Stevens or Mallory McMorrow certainly could win this race. And I even believe Elsaid could as well. So with that said, at this point, we're going to put Michigan in the lean Democratic column. Not likely, not safe, but lean anywhere from 1 to 5%, another safe margin there. With that said, let's move on over to Ohio, one state that Sherrod Brown is running for the Senate seat after he lost 2 years ago he lost the race in 2024, I'm sorry. And ultimately, he's running again, trying to defeat appointed Senator Husted for this race. A lot of polling suggests that Husted is still ahead. I also agree if we go to Vote Hub on this race as well. It seems very likely that Democrats still have a lot of work to do here if they want to flip the state of Ohio. And I do agree with that. I mean, of course, the margin is super close here. I mean, we're talking about 0.8 percentage points according to Vote Hub. I don't quite think it's that close. I'm going to give this to Jon Husted in that lean Republican margin for the state of Ohio. So I don't think that changes versus our last update for the Senate map either. The only change that we've seen so far is, well, nothing. I think I've kept everything the same: Michigan, Maine, and Ohio from my February prediction, which of course was a long time ago. But with that said, let's move on over and talk about the state of North Carolina, another state that I've talked about frequently on this channel, and one that's certainly going to be important towards the Senate control in the 2026 midterms. North Carolina is a state that Roy Cooper is almost, I don't want to say certain, but almost certain to win. I mean, he's performing super well. Former governor, very popular, and Michael Whatley just not the candidate that Republicans seemingly thought he was going to be coming into this race. So with that said, of course, we go over to Vote Hub 2 to look at this race, 7.3%. I mean, huge margin, and certainly an important flip for Democrats in the state of North Carolina. Going to give this to Democrats on that likely Democratic margin. So very, very good pickup for Democrats in the state of North Carolina. And that brings us to the final three states: Georgia, Texas, and Alaska. And ultimately, these three will decide the Senate control. As we see, Republicans currently at 49, Democrats at 48. Republicans only need 50, with Vice President Vance breaking that tie. So we'll see what we think as we continue through this video. So in the state of Georgia, another state that I think Democrats are certainly continue to perform well in, and I don't know that changes heading into these midterm races. I mean, Jon Ossoff, a very strong candidate who has proven himself time and time again and been able to outperform polls in every single poll. I mean, we're talking about a race that just 6 years ago, he narrowly won. I mean, it went to a runoff, and I'm going to be honest, I don't even think that this race goes into a runoff in 2026. I think that we see Jon Ossoff win in November for the Senate seat, and I think it's super important for the race for the Senate for Democrats, and ultimately a likely Democratic seat. So I'm going to give this to Democrats. This is a different margin than what I originally had, but I'm going to give it to Jon Ossoff also in that likely margin. I mean, I think that if we go over to Vote Hub 2, I mean, 7.3 percentage points on Jon Ossoff winning this point, the margin for him winning this race in Georgia. I mean, certainly a very big opportunity for him, and I think that that's the case. I mean, I think versus my last prediction where I had this in the lean Democratic column, so anywhere from 1 to 5%, I just think that Jon Ossoff continues to perform really well in polls. And I think that that's really helping him, and ultimately going to decide this race in a lot of ways is going to be not only the Democratic environment, but also just how well Jon Ossoff has been able to campaign and how polling is proven that as well. So with that said, Jon Ossoff also winning this race in that likely Democratic margin. Very big win for Democrats in the state of Georgia as of my prediction here in May. So with that said, let's move over to the state of Texas, one that a lot of people would not expect that we would be talking about in 2026, but ultimately we are. Texas is going to be an extremely important state, as we can tell, for Senate control, because in order for Democrats to win the Senate, they need not only Texas, but Alaska as well. So with that said, let's take a look at where polling suggests that James Tallarico is, and compared to not only John Cornyn, but also Ken Paxton as of the day I'm filming this. The Texas runoff race for the Republican Party has not yet been held. So with that said, James Tallarico in the YouGov poll from April 10th to 20th wins against John Cornyn by 7 points and wins against Ken Paxton by 8 points. If we go over to Vote Hub, we'll see that they have this race as a 59% chance of Republicans winning it, and have the eventual Republican nominee at 1.8% margin over James Tallarico. Now, personally, I'm going to have to disagree with VoteHub on this margin. I think that this race is much closer than that, if not in the Democrats' favor. If we take a look at polling and see where this suggested is, I mean, James Tallarico continues to perform really well in every single poll since that primary race. I mean, we've seen public policy polling, Tallarico +2. We've seen impact research +1, +2, only winning by 1 point against Paxton, 2 points against Cornyn. Slingshot strategies, Tallarico +3 against Cornyn, Tallarico +5 against Paxton, and then that YouGov poll that we seen out just a few weeks ago, Tallarico +8 against Paxton, Tallarico +7 against Cornyn. Now this is going to be a controversial take, but I think Democrats are already favored to win in Texas. I know a lot of you are going to disagree with me in the comment section below, and I'm subject to your opinions on this. But I disagree with this margin by VoteHub and where they say that this race is. Of course, I understand how difficult it is for Democrats to win this race. But if you've followed my channel for any length of time, you know that when we were talking about this race back in February and going into March when the primary was had, I continued to say James Tallarico was the better candidate against Jasmine Crockett to win in this race. And that's only proven from polling. With that said, this is going to be the first flip compared to my last prediction where I have Democrats actually winning the state of Texas by a very slim tilt margin. I mean, we're talking about tilt Democrats. So anywhere below a percentage point, I believe James Tallarico wins the state by. And while it's a controversial take, I think at this point, we can't deny the fact that James Tallarico continues to perform well, not only against Ken Paxton, who may not be the Democratic nominee. We may come in a couple of weeks from now and be talking about John Cornyn again being the Republican nominee. But at this point, we don't know. But either way, Tallarico continues to perform well against both Cornyn and Paxton. So with that said, I think James Tallarico narrowly wins as of my prediction in May. Of course, a lot is going to happen between now and the November elections, and we'll talk more about that in future predictions. We'll be continuing to have these predictions, and maybe in a couple months from now, I'll say, well, actually, I think Republicans are going to win Texas. We'll see. But as of today, I disagree with the VoteHub margin, and I'm ultimately putting this in the tilt Democratic margin. With that said, we've got one state left to decide Senate control, and that's the state of Alaska. Alaska is another really interesting one that a lot of people wouldn't necessarily think that we'd be talking about for a prediction on the Senate race, but ultimately, here we are. Mary Peltola, a former congresswoman from the state of Alaska, continues to perform well in polling, and ultimately, against Dan Sullivan, may end up winning this race and flipping a Senate race in Alaska for the first time in a while. The latest Alaska Survey Research poll had Peltola up by 7 points against Sullivan. The same poll conducted in March, so a month earlier, had Peltola +5. She continues to overperform her margin from the month prior, and that only continues if we go over to the VoteHub margin as well, where Democrats have a 53.6% chance of winning this race. Mary Peltola at 50.3, Dan Sullivan at 49.7, winning by 0.6 percentage points. Now, of course, I'll be honest, I don't think that this is a total blowout for Republicans. For Democrats. I think that this is a very, very, very close race. I mean, Dan Sullivan and Mary Peltola both, I would argue, pretty decent candidates. Certainly, Mary Peltola is a good candidate, and Dan Sullivan, I also would argue, is a pretty decent candidate for Republicans to try and win this race. But ultimately, the environment is just not in favor of Republicans, and Mary Peltola having such a strong base in Alaska and being able to perform really well there, I believe she also wins this race. I think it's going to be another slim margin, and this is also another flip from my last prediction. I believe it's also in that tilt Democratic margin, so anywhere under a percentage point. So with that said, Democrats win Senate control with 51 seats to Republicans' 49 seats. And we see a couple of different changes compared to my last prediction, and those come out of the last three states that we talked about. In Georgia, where this flips not from a lean Democrat, but to a likely Democrat. Texas completely flips from being a likely Republican to a tilt Democrat. And Alaska flips from being a I believe it was a likely Republican to a tilt Democrat, maybe lean Republican. I can't remember for sure on that. But ultimately, Democrats in this prediction win Senate control in November, and ultimately, the Senate Majority Leader would be Chuck Schumer or whoever Democrats decided after those November elections. So with that said, let me know what you think in the comments below. I know that a lot of people are going to disagree, especially with my last two predictions, maybe even Michigan as well. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Who do you think ends up winning Senate control? Don't forget to like and subscribe on the video. Comment down below your thoughts and future predictions you want to see on the channel as well. With that said, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.